Your family has been chosen to make a horrible decision. If you fail to choose, the world will end.
So you just got done watching the new M. Night Shyamalan apocalyptic psychological thriller by the name of Knock at the Cabin, and you want to talk spoilers? Well, you found the right video. In today's breakdown, we'll be covering topics such as the plot summary, detailing my thoughts on some of the deeper meanings, discussing the major reveals, and by the end of the video, I thought it would be interesting to explore the differences between how the film ends and how the book ends. We got so much to go over, and I'm so excited to be here with you all. But before we get into all those fun topics, let's start the conversation in the comments below. What did you all think of Knock at the Cabin? What were some of the Easter eggs, deeper meanings? What were some of the theories you all took away after watching this? And for my book readers, which ending did you prefer? The way that the film ends, the way that the book ends? Let's talk about it in the comments below. And of course, if you all enjoyed today's breakdown, make sure you all are hitting that thumbs up button and consider sharing this video to anyone and everyone you know that wants to talk about this project. I would really appreciate it. With all that being said, full spoilers ahead. We open the film with the credits and we see these different drawings in the background, and I was assuming that these were the visions that the strangers will be detailing a little bit later, because this is where my mind was at opening this film. I thought initially this was maybe going to lead to them being revealed that they were all a part of some type of a sane asylum and that they all made this apocalyptic situation in their head and that these drawings were more of their delusions. But of course that wasn't the case, but let me know if you all were thinking the same thing. But we get to meet these characters, first meeting Wynn, who's 8 years old, and she loves catching grasshoppers and naming them after her friends. And I thought it would be pretty interesting to kind of get a little bit of an understanding of the significance of what a grasshopper can actually mean. And when you look up a grasshopper, there's different symbols, such as they're known to have good luck and good fortune, which to me may tie into the fate of this character by the end of this film. Let me know what you all think about that. But also, one could look at her capturing these grasshoppers and trapping them in a jar as almost kind of foreshadowing what's to come with her and her family being trapped in this cabin. Wynn suddenly sees a tall, huge man approaching her, but Wynn tells him that she doesn't talk to strangers as he introduces himself as Leonard. Leonard befriends Wynn by telling her stories about himself, but Leonard seems distracted. He seems upset as he proceeds to tell Wynn that he's here for a certain reason. Leonard is sad about what he has to do and that he needs Wynn and her parents to help save the world. Wynn runs to her family to warn them, Eric and Andrew, as we see 3 other people arrive with very oddly shaped weapons that are also very dangerous. We see these 4 strangers manage to break into the cabin as Eric is knocked unconscious after hitting his head on the floor, and we get our first flashback of the movie. And this flashback details a moment in which we see Andrew's parents meeting Eric, and you can clearly see that his parents aren't comfortable or nor accepting of their relationship. And to me, this establishes the bond and vow between Eric and Andrew, as it's almost this them versus the world type of mindset, even though we see in this scene that it appears that Eric seems to have a good relationship with his family, but to me, this was them preparing and getting ready to create their own family of acceptance. Cut back to Eric waking up, and he has a concussion, which is very important to remember, as we see Leonard and his companions, Adrian, Redmond, and Sabrina, claim to have never met before meeting at a boardwalk, and they promise this family that they're not going to bring them any harm, but they have been compelled by visions by an unknown power to find this cabin with a chosen family. This vision detailed an up-and-coming doomsday apocalyptic situation in which Leonard claims that the oceans will rise, there will be a plague, the sky will fall, and God's fingers will scorch the earth, and an unending darkness will descend. But this can all be averted if the family chooses to kill one of their own as a sacrifice, and it can't be done on their own, nor can the invaders be involved. We see Eric and Andrew believe that they are lying and that this is an attack rooted in hate and delusions because of their same-sex marriage, as well as this is a very reasonable conclusion to come to considering what we know would happen to Andrew at the bar a little bit later in the film. As we move over to our very first sacrifice of the movie with this ritual, before Leonard prepares to see if they are willing to make this sacrifice, they all begin to tell something about themselves to show that they are normal people and they're not crazy following this cult type of idea, believing that the apocalypse is coming. You can see how nervous the invaders are because right now this is almost an impossible task to convince this family to believe them, and we will definitely be having a deeper conversation about the theme of this film being belief. Now, I really thought the performances were excellent in this moment. As we notice, Redmond is extremely impatient, important to take notice of his behavior, but we're about to find out why. As he details that he had a troubled past when he was younger, but he's now a changed man who works at a gas company. Now, enough time has passed and wasted as Leonard poses the question if they're willing to make the sacrifice, and their immediate response is no, which leads to Redmond starting to cry, and he wants to put this family in the position of looking at him, almost as if he's saying, look at what your decision has led to, as he places a white cloth mask over his head and says the following: a part of humanity must be judged as the three others proceed to use these dangerous weapons and hit him over the head numerous times, killing him. Wow, what a bloody, gruesome ritual. What did you all think about that first sacrifice in the comments below? As now it's time to prove that this isn't a hoax as they turn on the television. And by the way, this is where we get our stereotypical tradition of M. Night Shyamalan making an appearance. He has his cameo as the air fryer infomercial plays, but in comes breaking news. As is showcasing this earthquake damage, and shortly after, the oceans begin to rise, killing many. Now, seeing those ocean waves coming up to 50 foot high was quite terrifying to me, as were the other horrors we see a little bit later in the film, but the POV of someone recording this particular moment reminded me of another M. Night film of someone recording an alien, you know what I'm talking about, Signs, which that moment still gives me chills thinking about today. But it's very important to go back to Redmond's death. Right before he was killed, there was a very bright light that starts to come into the cabin, and it appears that only Eric was the only one to see this. As the question comes up, was this God or the power attached to the visions, or was this just a part of Eric's concussion? Let me know your thoughts on that. Me personally, I think this was just a sign and kind of foreshadowing of Eric's belief, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Now, at this point, Andrew is no believer of what's transpired on television because an earthquake was already happening prior to the invaders coming to their cabin. I started to see the difference between Eric and Andrew, as Eric seems to be more of a believer in a higher power bigger than himself, as Andrew seems to be more of a logical person. Case in point, let's go to flashback number 2. And this is adopting Wynn. As they are waiting to finally meet her, there's a line that Andrew tells Eric, something on the lines of, you can pray, it's okay. To me, that made it seem as though Eric praying is something that might come up with judgment with Andrew. And from what I researched from the book, which we'll go into details bit as far as the ending a little bit later, Andrew in the book was an atheist and Eric was a Christian. Now, I do personally wish the film would have made that a plot point in the film to kind of focus on that, as well as see that they had this type of relationship that has some conflicting beliefs in religion. That's something I wish the film would explore just a little bit more. But going back to what's going on, you see in this scene that they also had to lie about the relationship, claiming that their wife wasn't able to make it and that this was her brother. They finally have Ren, and you can see that this family is the most important thing to both of them, and that they are willing to do anything to stay together. Cut to the next morning, as after being helped by Sabrina, who's trying to convince Eric to help, we also see Andrea making food for Wynn as she tells her, you're a good person. As Leonard poses the question again, they yet again refuse, and we learn it's Andrea's time as she makes her final plea. She's not just a cook at a Mexican restaurant, but she's a mother, as she pours her heart out about her son, who she mentioned to fail the day before when they were given the details about their past. But in her vision, she goes on to say that she saw him burning in her arms. And I'm going to be honest with you all. To me, it did seem like she was making it up, which Andrew actually points out in the scene. But her time has unfortunately ran out and she's killed. Now, step 2 begins as Sabrina turns on the television and a plague called the X09 virus has begun, and it seems to only attack children. Now, Andrew yet again attempts to prove that this is a coincidence, as he's already known about the virus for a while and it's just inevitable to spread. Again, this is a prime example of this pointing towards the main theme throughout this film: do you believe? These characters' beliefs were constantly put to question, and others dismissing one's belief in this back and forth about what you believe and what you don't believe. For example, when trying to convince her parents that people are there to hurt them, Leonard trying to get the others to convince them that they're trying to stop the apocalypse, one's suspicions and one's suspicious nature can cloud one's judgment. So I think that the heart of the story is, do you believe this person? Should you take your suspicious nature and allow that to cloud your judgment? That's a huge theme that we get throughout this narrative. Cut to Andrew figuring out something about Redmond, and is that he saw him before, and this is where we get our third flashback. We cut to Aaron and Andrew telling each other about their flaws as they're preparing to become parents, but in comes a bearded individual who's clearly instigating the situation and claims that they were being too loud. Now, as we know throughout the film, and actually in this very conversation, Andrew has a bit of a temper, but rightfully so, because they weren't bothering anyone in this moment. As we see, the bearded man ends up hitting him over the head with a bottle, and we as an audience see just enough of his face to realize that it was Redmond, or as Andrew finds out, his real name is Rory, proving the point that they were targeting them as an attack. Now, this is a key example of someone's belief being questioned, as Leonard doesn't believe his name was made up, nor does it even matter because he was a part of their shared vision. And this huge argument starts to break out because it's mentioned that they spoke over a chat board, and this presents the opportunity for Andrew to sneak out to get the gun out of his truck. Now, we see Andrew's able to get the gun even after Sabrina tries stopping him, and this is where Andrew and Eric seem to now have the advantage, as it's believed Sabrina ran off when he got the gun, only for her to run towards him from the back balcony as he unfortunately shoots her in the stomach. Now, I'm not entirely sure if she officially died after getting shot in the stomach, but we do see Leonard proceeds with the ritual, and now the third stage begins as the sky is falling. We see on the television airplanes and different aircrafts, I believe it was over 700, start to fall from the sky, and it's believed to be a hack, but Andrew has had enough. He believes this was all coordinated, all planned. They were constantly looking at their watches. The news tickers seem to be on a loop, and Andrew shows Leonard Roy's ID to prove that he went by another name. Going back to Andrew's point, there is something to say about receiving information via a TV on the news, especially considering their current situation, being trapped against their will in this cabin with no outside assistance nor outside information. There are limitations to only taking in the news feed as their only source of information, because we all know there's always more to the story. So I can still kind of understand where Andrew was coming from, but he's sooner than later gonna see that this wasn't all a coincidence. Now, after gaining control of the situation with the gun in hand, they instruct Leonard to go to the bathroom and lock himself inside, but I think this is the biggest twist in the entire film, as Andrew and Eric believe that this 6-foot giant Leonard managed to find his way through that tiny little window. I couldn't have been the only one that thought that was kind of funny that they thought that he actually went through that. Let me know what you all thought at that moment. But getting back to what's going on here, Eric is starting to see things more clearly, but at this point, Leonard heads outside to make his sacrifice, but not long after that, he went ahead and showed them who he's trying to save, which he reveals that it was his kids. He's a teacher of second graders, which explains why throughout this film he was so good to win, as well as you can understand his patience throughout this narrative. Now, we see Andrew and Eric instruct that Wynn go to the treehouse, and this is where we see the skies are thundering as Leonard describes his vision as hearing all the kids screaming. He goes on with the last ritual by cutting his own throat, as there's only a few minutes left to make the ultimate sacrifice. As the last stage begins with the scorching on Earth, Andrew's starting to believe this isn't all just a coincidence, but he still doesn't want to sacrifice his family, and he wants to walk the earth with Aaron and Wynn because the world never wanted to accept them. But we see Eric doesn't believe that this is a life worth living or is a life that's fulfilling, and he believes that by doing this sacrifice is for the greater good of humanity and that it's the most important thing right now. He convinces him that he must die as he details why it's important for the invaders to introduce themselves and meet them because they are aspects of humanity and that they are the four horsemen, Leonard being guidance with his teaching and coaching, Sabrina was healing as a nurse, Adrian was nurturing for her cooking and her son, and Redmond was malice because of his actions towards Andrew. And they had to witness their deaths to feel this sense of loss and understand their sacrifices, as he goes on to say they must have had chosen them as this family because they had the purest love. I'm going to be honest with you all. I'm no expert of the apocalypse, but this is definitely a different version of the Four Horsemen that I've known of. I've always associated the Four Horsemen with death, famine, war, and conquest, but I guess one can say this is M. Night's twist on those characters. Let me know what you all thought about that reveal as we wrap up the film with Eric talking about the figure he saw in the light before Redmond had died, as he goes into detail about the vision that he had. Now, he goes over this vision saying that he saw an older version of Wynn leaving her practice with Andrew as they both seem to be happy. Now, he goes on to say that Wynn has found someone to love her, completely love her, and it's a similar love to what Andrew and Eric had and as far as what they experienced. So I'm not going to lie, that was a very sweet moment for me, as you got to remember also, going back to what I talked about, those grasshoppers and the meaning of a grasshopper, they sometimes represent abundance, achievement, freedom, wealth, and connecting that to the main theme of this film. Also, another significant thing about Grasshopper is taking a leap of faith. We pan over to take a look at the sky as we hear the gunshot alluding to Andrew killing Eric. We see Andrew goes to Wynn, and this is where it definitely hit home as far as the emotional punch, as we see Wynn is wondering if Daddy Eric has saved everyone, as Andrew doesn't answer but just gives her a hug. I really thought that was a great moment as they see and witness the cabin catching fire and being destroyed. As we wrap up to the final moments here, we end with the two of them finding Leonard's truck, where they discover that everything they were saying was true and their stories and their identity was a true fact. They arrive to this local diner to see the catastrophic events have stopped, and they ride off to the sunset listening to their family song, Boogie Shoes. Now, I'm going to be honest with you all here. The emotions definitely hit for me when Wynn was talking to Andrew, but the diner scene felt a little unreal. Only one person calling their loved ones. I would imagine that this small diner, regardless of the circumstance, even though things were calming down, it would have been complete chaos. But getting back to some things here as we wrap up, I also wish the film would have explored the couple's belief more on one believing the invaders versus the other one not believing anything that's going on, and really kind of hitting on that conflict between the two, especially knowing that in the book, Andrew was an atheist and Eric was a Christian. I wish that was just explored just a little bit further. I did really enjoy the arc that we get with Andrew as he came to be someone who didn't believe in anything except for his family, to ultimately believing Eric and his vision. One more thing I wanted to bring up as far as maybe a coincidence, but I want to point out the importance of the release date of this film and how it might impact this film's themes. Now, as you all know, this film is coming out on Friday, which is February 3rd, 2023. 23 is a number that represents change, progress, and innovation. In terms of numerology, the number 23 signifies new beginnings, revolution, and transformation. These number patterns hold a lot of positive energy and signify spiritual growth, which again to me is a very big theme of this film. So we made it to the end of the plot summary, and you may be wondering, well, wait, where's the big M. Night twist? Well, like I said in my spoiler-free review, I think this film didn't necessarily rely on a twist. Now, yes, there were some reveals, but it wasn't that stereotypical someone was dead the whole time type of thing going on. And also, I thought the trailer really did sell us of what we got. It was a pretty straightforward film, but we also know this was based on a novel, and I think this might be where the twist might come in, because M. Night has definitely made changes to what happened in the book versus what happens in the film. Now, I'm going to leave a video in the description of this video describing why M. Night made that change. But for those that plan on reading the book, which I'm going to give you all full disclosure, I haven't read the book, but I know someone that has read it, and they kind of let me know what happened. So I do plan on reading the book inevitably, but I say all that to say this: if you are someone that wants to read the book and you don't want to get spoiled, this is a spoiler alert for how the book ends. You have been warned. Let's talk about it. To give you all context of what I'm going to be recapping here, at this point in the novel, Andrew has the gun and we see Eric protecting Wynn. So with that being said, Andrea has a knife and we see Andrew tells her to drop the weapon. She doesn't listen. She runs towards Andrew, leaving him to shooting her twice and killing her. At this point, Leonard overpowers Andrew and tries to take the gun away. Meanwhile, Wynn is helping Eric untie himself from the chair. In this struggle, Leonard squeezes Andrew's hand and the trigger goes off, unfortunately killing Wynn, which obviously is much different than what happened in the film. At this point in the novel, everyone is devastated. Leonard apologizes over and over again. He gets tied up. He begs Eric to turn the television on, which he does. The news indicates that the bird flu is traveling fast. As we see, Andrew begs Eric to go, but he can't seem to do so. As Sabrina, coming up from the basement, she starts to question if this was a blind belief, which we know is obviously different from the movie. She tells them both her story and promises to help them out. Now, in a trance, she ends up killing Leonard. She turns on the TV and there are planes starting to crash down all over the world. Eric starts believing and Andrew is still dismissive. Now, remember, in the book, Eric is a Christian, Andrew is an atheist. Even Wynn's death didn't stop because it wasn't willing to sacrifice. Now, again, from my understanding, this is where in the novel they are even questioning God's power. How could you let something like this happen and an ultimate sacrifice, going back to their belief? Now, at the end, they escape the cabin. The three leave the cabin to Redmond's truck. Sky is now turned dark. Suddenly, the rope from Sabrina opens up and she ultimately is begging and pleading and she ultimately kills herself, leaving Eric to taking the gun. He's thinking about sacrificing himself, but Andrew comes over to him and tells him that they aren't going to do it. They are going to face whatever it is together and not give into the evil apocalyptic plan, not even if the world ends, and that's where the book ends. So my question for the book readers or people that stuck around who plan to read the book: which ending did you prefer? The book ambiguous and bleak tragic ending with the wind of death, or how the film ends with Eric dying and Andrew and Wynn having a happy future together? If you ask me, again, I haven't read the novel, but if I'm being honest, even though the ending of a book is pretty tragic, pretty sad, it is more impactful for me versus seeing them at a diner, them driving off. I actually, again, haven't read the book, but I prefer how the book ended. But let me know again, book ending, film ending. Let's talk about it in the comments. With all that being said, we've made it to the end of this video. I really appreciate you all watching. Again, just leave your thoughts in the comments, deeper meanings, Easter eggs, book readers, of ending of the film. What other changes did they have in the book that they didn't have in the film? Which changes did you prefer in the book versus the film? Let's have those conversations. You all have been awesome. Hope you're staying safe. As you all can see on the screen now, come and join the community by subscribing, hitting that thumbs up, as well as sharing this video. But also, if you haven't already, check out my spoiler-free review for this film. Check out my other breakdowns. You all be safe, and we'll catch you on the next video.